Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting episode of Two Men in Black and White. Wow, what a weekend. Happy Monday to you. Let's get right into it. Brock Ganeles joins us now from the beautiful Hudson Valley in upstate New York. And Brock, being half a world away or quarter of a world away down in Panama this weekend, you definitely feel the tension with the U.S. here. People are not happy here about Panama being part of Trump's ire and being a target of his. So, what happened this weekend? Let's talk about the results. Did we achieve anything? I know you were out on the front lines, and I love that, my brother. What did you see in the Rhinebeck protest? Hit your volume there.
Yeah, I muted myself. I muted myself a second. I'd gone to New York the last time, so when I saw that there was one right here, I was like, okay, let me take the temperature of a different, type of protest. Let's see what's going on here. Predominantly white community, but as I mentioned recently, just had some ICE activity just this week in the town next door. So it had definitely been, the hornet's nest had been riled up a little bit. It kind of hit home a little just in the past several days. And the turnout was really big. I'm going to give you a couple takeaways, two main takeaways. Number one is that in April, it was all white people marching, and it was a lot about don't touch my Medicare, don't touch my Social Security. Like that was the predominant, if you had the dominant theme of the placards that people were holding, those were the main two, right? White people saying, hey, get off of my Social Security. This time, the crowd was a little more mixed, even for, very white community. Had a little more Latinos, almost no blacks, only one black who was actually coordinating and running the whole thing, ironic, funnily. No blacks in the crowd. A lot more about ICE and the taking away, the un-American nature of the Trump regime, the military being, a lot of military people and military signs like the military is being misused. That's number one. So the theme of the posters were different. Wasn't about money. It was about America. And number two was politicians were involved. It was all, remember I told you the first time it was just a walk and no one said anything. There were actually no words spoken at all. No messaging given, nothing. Met in Bryant Park, walked down Fifth Avenue, and there were chants, but there was no organized effort, which is fine. That's, indivisible. It's like sort of not necessarily centrally organized, but the politicians were out. State senators at the local, right? It was a local protest. State senators, state representative, Anthony Delgado, who's the lieutenant governor, his wife was there. He was probably at a bigger one. He was speaking, right? He's black. He's going to run against Kathy Hochul in the primary in New York for governor. So they're going after the incumbent. He was there because they live in Rhinebeck, right? So two main takeaways. The topics that were focused on were different. And this time the politicians are involved. I think the politicians see the crowds and now they want to get in front of them. And so it was direct messaging, and it was much more, because of that, it was overtly anti-Trump, right? Overtly spoken, we need to, and a lot of talk about fighting, which we can get to in a second, because what is fighting? Was it fighting? Did I really fight for democracy on Saturday by getting out of my house for 2 hours and going to a rally and then coming home? Did I really fight for democracy? I mean, I showed up. I was a part of the numbers. We're all trying to show each other that we care, so the numbers matter around the country.
Right.
But did we move the needle? What do you think?
Well, we definitely moved the needle in Trump's house because, all the reporting came back that he was livid about the number of people that did or did not show up to the nation's capital. I mean, they're saying 250,000 people were there. There is no way in hell 250,000 people were in the nation's capital on Saturday for that parade. Through social media, not necessarily mainstream media. I did not watch any mainstream media. But through my social media follows, I saw empty stands and empty bleachers all throughout the parade route. So that to me was a good sign, because even though, we couldn't get to DC, and I think it's a good thing that, well, maybe it's not, because you and I want things to get riled up. We want things to get hot and heavy. and there was an arrest of an 80-year-old veteran that was just heartbreaking. I mean, really, you pulled this guy up out of his walker so you can cuff him? I mean, it's again more cruelty, more insanity. They don't know how to govern. They misread the tea leaves on this whole military parade thing. Nobody wanted this to happen. Even the MAGA crowd wasn't that deep, because you got to think about it. A lot of MAGA, small business owners, right? Those people in the rural areas, they're being directly impacted now. They probably didn't have discretionary income to go to a fucking military parade and rally at the nation's capital. So, I think he shot himself in the foot. I think I'm happy that the crowd was incredibly small and way under what he had hoped for. And so now he understands. If he didn't understand before, he understands now that he does not have a mandate to run roughshod over our democracy.
I saw a number, someone who'd done a count had it like at 8,700. I mean, a number that was like really embarrassing, disgracefully low. I did turn on CNN for maybe 5. I may have lasted 10 minutes just to see the parade and how they were going to covering it. And I was like, and my takeaway was just like, this is fucking boring. Like what? Okay, a tank's rolling down the street and there were more people at the U.S. Golf Open, right? There's a bunch of people, just, a handful of people clapping. Trump's falling asleep. Melania's got the puss face on, right? Hegseth's sitting there. They were just bored, right? Everyone was just bored. Rubio was falling asleep. And it was just like, okay, this is a colossal waste of time and money. Okay, so we checked that box. That was a loser. Trump's trying to spin it. And that, in essence, he lost face and it was embarrassing. Right. Okay. Around the country, there's a lot of really big rallies, huge numbers. Philadelphia, huge. Chicago, right? LA was big again. And then even Boise, Idaho, Dallas, like just all over the place. Okay. Almost no violence once again. Somebody got shot in Salt Lake City. That's barely been covered because that got overwhelmed by those shootings in Minnesota that maybe we'll touch on in a little bit. But so my take is, okay, that's what happened over the weekend. Media covered the No Kings rallies, at least 50-50'd it for the most part.
Right.
But now we sit here on Monday morning, and is anything really different except, we're happy Trump got embarrassed. But have we taken a step forward? Because this morning, Trump's threatening more blue cities with harsher crackdowns from ICE. And has basically said he's not going to crack down on the farms anymore because he really figured out that they're all his voters. Right. So now it's just going to be targeted ICE raids.
Right. And that's the scary part, Brock, because, he's doing it based on, his feelings, right? Because he's in his feelings now. So he's targeting the blue states, said he's going to double down on California. Obviously, New York is going to get hit. He's mad he got run out of there. Probably Philadelphia, places like that. But here's the thing. He's starting to get so much pushback. ICE is starting to get so much pushback. It's not just grab another family off the street or grab another hardworking husband off the street who's here, trying to go through the process and you're removing his protected status. They're getting a lot of pushback on that. Because the fact of the matter is, Brock, we can't live without these people. The nature of our economy runs on this immigrant labor because it's cheap. You don't have to pay benefits, right? And they're gaming the system, right? Because they work the system, start their own business, they pay taxes, and they all come with a plan. Right? They all come with a plan to give themselves a better life. So they don't mind starting at the bottom and working their way up, where spoiled Americans are no way going to take a dishwasher job like the restaurant owner told you in that next town over. Nobody's taking that job because they can't afford to, number one. And number two, our young people, our young workforce is so spoiled and got to have it right now. They think they should be starting in the C-suite. So they're not going to work their way up unless, they're directly told to. But I can't remember the last time I seen a college student parking cars, taking bags up in the hotel, doing these jobs that you and I did, working at McDonald's, working at Roy Rogers. I cut the grass at Roy Rogers on Route 6 and almost quit because it was so hot. But those are the things we did without a problem. And now we can't go back to that system because we don't have the labor force within our own communities.
Mark, if we wanted to really shut down an immigration, quote, problem, then the US government would have the rules and the sanctions and the crackdown would go on the employers,
Right.
not the employees.
Not the employees.
If the employers were first getting a fine for having undocumented workers, two, second time maybe, threat of jail, right? Third
Right.
time, third time in jail, right? Like they wouldn't be hiring, they wouldn't be rolling the dice on hiring undocumented workers. So therefore, you'd cut off the demand side of the equation,
right.
and people wouldn't come from other countries because it wouldn't be, the grass wouldn't be greener here. It wouldn't be, a smart economic move for them. They don't want to leave their country, and the most of them are leaving their families to do this and then sending money back home. So we could go that route, but no, we keep rounding up the people instead of actually addressing the problem. If it is a problem, or we allow for more worker visas, resident workers, hopefully I would argue with a path to citizenship. You don't have to start that way, but these people more legal in the country, we're taxing them anyway. Doesn't mean they get to vote. They're not citizens, but put them in a legal status and on a path to citizenship for the ones that play by the rules along the way.
Exactly.
And that's a reasonable immigration policy that kind of you would think makes sense for everyone. But if it's people of color, then MAGA doesn't like that. That's butting heads against the white supremacy movement. And because all we ever want to talk about is crime, God forbid a worker commits a crime, then, we got to throw out millions and throw them in gulags.
Right.
I mean, it's not practical. It's not good for America, but we haven't been able to do smart policy. And now we've worked our way to the dumbest, most aggressive, most, I would argue, un-American.
Absolutely. And from 2008 to 2016, we tried to come up with a policy that was embracing the fact that we did need these workers, right? We were giving them paths to citizenship and trying to come up with smart immigration policies. And, again, the Republican Party and its politics needs a foil, right? They always need the big bad boogeyman. Remember the convoy that never got here, that was supposed to be coming to rape our women and children and pillage the countryside? That thing never made it here. All they do is lie and make shit up, and we fall for the banana in the tailpipe, and now we've ended up, with another 4 years of this clown. Just think, Brock, we're only 6 months deep into this nonsense. I
want to jump in. One of the other thing that I did get to feel, even in this Rhinebeck rally, was there was a lot of expression of solidarity with the undocumented workers, the migrants, the people here on work visas. There was a lot of white solidarity. There weren't a lot of those colored faces in the crowd, maybe because my small town is white. I couldn't tell from all the footage whether we were getting a good multicultural, multiracial outpouring in the other cities. Right. My guess is if Little Rhinebeck was an indicator, because there were some Mexican flags there, that my guess is there were more Latinos out on the streets. You can tell me whether there were any black people on the streets. I don't think there were. I think there was one black person in a crowd of 1,200 people in Rhinebeck.
Yeah. Wow. 1,200 people out there?
Yeah, there were 1,200 people out there. Yeah. In this little park. And it was a big turnout for such a small town.
Right. And
a lot of people were going to a second one in like Kingston or Albany or somewhere else. I heard a lot of people talking as they were leaving. They were heading to a second rally in, a bigger one in a bigger location.
Right. And I think, from the footage I was able to see, there were not a lot of my brothers and sisters on the street.
Yeah, we didn't expect that.
And we've got to get over that as a people, because we are part of this democracy too, right? And, we need to be more united with our Latino brothers and sisters. And I I've been talking with the group that I'm traveling with about why, we're so disconnected and nobody really has a good answer. Right? Like historically, we've been pitted against each other in tight urban spaces, right? Because Asian groups, Latino groups have been able to establish ownership in our community. They own bodegas, they own the hair shop, they own the liquor stores, right? And we've not been able to claim any ownership, whether it's, the mom and pop shop on the street, the dry cleaner, or any of those necessary kind of storefronts that are needed to succeed. So there has become, especially if you look at Los Angeles, there's this, they have a couple of flashpoints with Latasha Harlins and a couple of crime, the Rodney King situation, obviously. But we saw it rear its head in the LA riots where the Asian stores were targeted, and Black folks were just frustrated with, other people coming into their community and being able to provide good lives for themselves off of our hard-earned dollar and didn't respect it. And that's kind of what we were able to surmise as we looked at the division, because we don't understand the division. But part of it is that Latino America, Asian America, every other thing America besides Black America seems to be more accepted in our eyes by white America, which gives you opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think Hervé, who joined us a few days ago, kind of hit on it. I mean, there's definitely a resentment about the voting pattern in
Yes,
November. Near term, like the nearest. Like he also said, if you go back historically, that maybe Latino America wasn't as fighting hard for Black civil rights, voting rights, and the like, and they maybe got handed things in a way that Black people were always having to fight for, and they weren't really necessarily out there on the streets with them. So Black people a little resentful, and certainly the demographic of the changing demographic of the Latino vote that may have pushed Trump over the edge. Definitely created a resentment. It's sort of like you broke it, you fix it type of thing. But we'll see. I feel like Latino America is coming around. That there's definitely a buyer's remorse factor that hopefully
yeah,
gains momentum, and I hope Saturday helped that. I hope that Latino Americans saw white Americans out there arguing against ICE, and not just arguing against the fact that the military shouldn't be there, but just arguing about that this is not the due process we want in this country, and this is not the way Latino Americans should be treated, whether they're citizens or non-citizens. There was that step towards solidarity there that I
nice.
hope is a step in the right direction, because I'm hoping something positive came out of such huge protests over the weekend. Because my worry is that Project 2025 is just marching along. Trump was mad, he threw ketchup at the wall, he whined, he complained, but then we come around on Monday and nothing's changed and nothing's better, and this ball is just continuing to roll downhill and roll over more and more of us.
Right.
And it's this is where we can segue to violence, right? The right is violent. The left keeps preaching we got to be nonviolent, we got to be nonviolent. But the right is violent. I mean, Salt Lake City shooting, ICE agents and military all over the streets. And then that horrific shootings up in Minnesota, which of course was another right-wing militarized crazy deciding that he didn't like the lawmakers in his locality. So he decided to impersonate a policeman and gun them down.
Which is insane. In and of itself. And what we cannot allow to happen is for the, MAGA wing and, political machine to hijack the narrative and say, oh no, this guy was appointed by Tim Walz and, he was a Democrat. Because I saw them doing that early on, through the social media feeds. And we cannot allow that to happen because and the MAGA politicians need to come out and condemn this. Because if it starts, with a local mayor in a small town, Minneapolis in Hennepin County, what's next, right? Are one of our House members, Senate members, judges, all the rhetoric and scorn that they've directed at judges and Congress members and, members of the Senate. Do they really think that someone's not going to try and use violence again to prove their point, to get their point across? Because, these folks this is like an ideologue, right? This guy, worked a normal job, was in, government offices, right? Appointees of the governor. And So he's not some hardened criminal that decided to come, up off the streets and get up off his block and come out and murder somebody for colors, right? This guy is an ideologue, right? Against abortion and against, all the things that make America great. Excuse my language, right? I mean, the freedom of choice, the freedom to be who we are, the freedom to love who we love, to marry who we love, right? The freedom of bodily autonomy. And this guy says no, right? And I'm going to resort to violence because of it. And if the Hegseth gnome, nut job Stephen Miller, wing thinks that these two things are not related, they are insane and out of their minds.
They know they're related. I keep looking at it as like, this is an intimidation campaign. The ICE agents are a part of it. Calling in the military is a part of it. Second Amendment has always been a part of it.
Right.
Letting all the Jan 6 rioters out of jail and walk the streets again is all a part of it. All these different pardons, right?
Right.
These militia groups being stand by and stand back and stand with us, basically. And you can see even from the rhetoric, no one in MAGA land gave a shit that those two politicians were shot. Some people, some of them mocked it. Mike Lee, who's a senator, mocked the whole thing, right? Like they didn't care. They're happy with it because this is an intimidation effort, right? Every step of this is an intimidation effort, which is why in the end, this is going to end up as a fight in a revolt because the Project 2025, the white supremacy movement is a violent movement. And you're not going to win just by walking down Fifth Avenue and feeling like you're showing the numbers. And we're going to get to get out the vote effort for the next election, because that next election may not happen or certainly might not be fair. Like, we're going to have to go out in overwhelming numbers. I know he said maybe it was good people weren't in D.C. because it embarrassed Trump. But there has to be a protest where 5 million people show up in D.C. and we shut the fucking thing down and people don't go home.
Right.
It's one thing on a Saturday to get up, go for a couple hours, show where you stand, have your voice be heard, see the collective strength or building strength of the people that agree with you, but then everybody goes home to their normal life and nothing really changes. Like we need national strikes. We need the types of protests where nobody goes home and the economy tanks and the wealthy class starts getting hurt, right? It has to affect everybody.
Yep.
Complacent white America is starting to get at least enraged enough to march, but not enraged enough to stay out there for a week and like say, we're not at DEFCON 5.
Yeah. And we need to get there quickly because, if this election is fair, we got 33 Senate seats and 435, House seats up for grabs in 26. We could win enough seats to impeach and remove. But we got to make sure that election is fair. We've got to get to DC, shut the fucker down, and then there has to be like literally no rush hour traffic on Monday, right? We can't go home. You're right. We have to stay there. We've got to muck up the works. And imagine if all of our immigrant labor just stayed home for a week, just a week. Imagine how that would impact
they can afford to, right? They got to eat too, so we got to figure some things out. But like, I get it. But yeah, it has to bleed into complacent white America, right? And the wealthy and the people that are giving money to all these right wing politicians and funneling money to Trump, corrupt Trump to get shit that works for them. Things have to work against them. Right? Like nobody orders from fucking Amazon. Like nobody goes on Facebook. Like nobody goes to work. We're all out on the streets. Like we need big rallies on a work day. We need to be gridlock. We need to create gridlock so that everybody has to address what's going on in the country and sort of pick their side and no one just sits at home.
Right. And look, we don't have enough folks that can stay home and still win this thing. We need 70% of America to say, fuck this. We're not doing this. We're not doing the King thing. We love our democracy too much. That's why we are or have been, the shining star on the hill for 260 years. We're not doing this.
Let me jump in, Mark. So I got a call this morning, surprisingly, from
Hmm.
one of my really good white friends.
Hmm.
Old friend of yours. They will stay nameless.
Oh,
Wanted to talk about the march. Did I go out to the protest? What was it like? Wanted to rant about what's going on in the country, rant about all the MAGA people living around them. And I said, okay, what's it going to take for you to
right,
get out and come out to one of these protests? And he was basically like, well, I don't want to just go out there and like walk for a couple hours and like feel like nothing got done. I said, so okay, so you're going to come out there when shit goes down, when shit starts to go maybe violent, because it may go that direction. When it's because he says, well, what? Because that's not going to do anything. I don't want to go out there and go on a march. Not going to do anything. I'm like, okay, so you're waiting for this to get ratcheted up. And he's like, well, I hope I would go out there if it gets like that. I'm like, okay, well then we're in a we'll wait and see moment. But interesting that the conditions in the country are working their way to what I would view as the complacent white American friends of mine. What I told you, the ones I think agree with
right,
me, but aren't there yet on the action. So maybe Saturday pushed a bunch of white people closer to the action because they saw so many other people out there. And that's why we just have to keep making noise and going out there, because it does, kind of influence people. Not at the speed I want it to happen, right? I'm like, come on, dude, get the fuck out there, right? Let's go. But what else you have to do for those 2 hours, We got to show big numbers. So maybe when the next one comes around, he'll be out there and not wait for like a fucking violent insurrection on his streets. Because what
right.
white people do understand is if shit starts going down and shit gets violent, you're not safe at home. You might as well be out on the streets.
Exactly, exactly. So I'm going to be interested this week to see the reaction from Black America, what they thought about the huge turnout in all these different cities. Remember, a lot of these cities, especially the urban hubs, have considerable Black populations in and around them. So I'm going to be interested to see how they react, what their thoughts are. And people are going to be telling us on social media what they thought, right? So that'll give us an idea as to whether or not folks are starting to come around. And if they are, that is great news for the movement.
Mark, if 5 or 10% more of complacent white America shows up, because they're starting to get rustled and they're seeing their friends out there, like, and going like, okay, I got to get out there, feeling pressured to get in, or their success breeds success. And some percentage of Black America gets out there, then the numbers are starting to work their way to overwhelming. And then, of course, we would argue if that happens and it's actually in DC,
Right,
all the better.
right,
All the better. Let's get on Trump's turf. Let's show up on Trump's turf. Let's be in his face and make it something he can't ignore, because he can't even get out of the White House. Like
right,
they have to like clear streets just so he can get out.
right.
And his
Or fly him out.
people can't get to work. Yeah, or a helicopter has to come in. Something that's immensely disruptive that has to be on the page one of every newspaper. They can't, and it's not 50-50 with a military parade, something that dominates the news flow in America to a point where mainstream media has to cover it. And no
Right,
one can pretend they don't know what's going on.
right. We got to get the Vietnam level news coverage where it dominated, the news cycle every day going forward.
Yeah. First
So
story
yeah,
every night.
yeah, so that'll be interesting to see, complacent white America, annoyed Black America, for lack of a better term, and what's it going to take to move the needle. But I think an all-out assault on DC is going to be necessary, and then you might see everybody out for that one. Because at that point, if let's say, 5051 calls for that or Indivisible calls for that, things have really gotten bad. We're on the brink of not coming back. I think we're on the brink of not coming back right now. But, things are really going to, get ratcheted up when we start calling for, the shutdown of DC and to shut down the White House and the wheels of government. And everybody just move toward DC and make it happen. You got.
I think there's politicians and or leaders that would want to speak to that crowd of 1 million people
Oh
in
yeah.
city. I think there's ones that would want to be out in front of that.
Right. And you can't arrest 1 million people. You can't arrest 100,000 people. you know? So, if you go out there scared of being arrested, don't worry about it. I mean, that's not something they're going to be able to do, right? If we are mucking up the streets, blocking up the streets of DC, which I've said dozens of times is easy to do, right? They're blocked up now. You can't get on 285 now. Get on the beltway around the nation's capital. So, it's something that we really have to take a hard look at because it's the only thing, like you said, that's going to move people towards some serious action towards getting rid of this fucking clown.
All right, sounds like a plan. I'm going to take the temperature more on complacent white America. You come back to me, tell me what you're hearing in the black community coming off the weekend, and that'll be good
Will
fodder,
do.
good fodder for tomorrow.
Will do. All right, buddy. Always a
Okay.
pleasure.
All right, Mark. Take care.
Good stuff.